Hey, how's it going, everybody? I hope everybody's having a good afternoon wherever you are. I have a really good guest today. I know you know him from the Locked On 49ers podcast. He is one half. He hosts that with Eric Crocker. They do that pretty much every day, I would say, especially through the off season, and then of course during the regular season as well. He has the majestic voice. It's none other than Brian Peacock. Brian, welcome to the stream.
Hey, Aaron, thanks for having me on again. Yeah, this is always fun. And people always ask, how do you do a podcast every day during the off season? And I just point to the NFL news cycle and say, look, there's more to talk about in the off season than the regular season sometimes. So it's been a lot of fun trying to do this every single day. Been doing it for 5 years now. Brought Eric Crocker on this summer as a full-time co-host, and it's been a lot of fun. I'm glad I brought on a co-host because we have a really good time chopping it up about the Niners every day.
I do like listening to the both of you. I mean, I'm cool with you by yourself, but I do like a player's perspective as well. So it's always nice to counterpoint to somebody who's just never played. I'm not saying anything's wrong with that. I'm just saying it's always a cool counterpoint to have a player share his opinion. Well, before we get started, I just wanted to give you the chance to introduce yourself for those who don't know, and where they can find you, all platforms, YouTube, everything.
Yeah, and we launched the YouTube channel late last year, November, I think we launched it. So things are going well there. So go find us on YouTube as well. And 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, we've got podcasts coming. Well, actually, Sunday night through Thursday night is when we record for the audio only pods on all of your podcast platforms. You can find Locked On 49ers first thing in the morning is we like to have those out record at night so we can get those out to you first thing in the morning on your audio platforms. So if you're on the way to work every day, Monday through Friday, you should have a brand new podcast talking about the 49ers with myself and Eric Crocker. And it is literally everywhere you can find podcasts, and now on YouTube if you want to see our mugs as well. And we usually post those right up after we record them at night during the weekdays as well, and Sunday nights included. So we kind of started doing that during the season with the Sunday night thing. We thought, yeah, let's keep it going through the off season as well. And there's so much to talk about, and we're going to get deep into the draft. Eric Crocker, my co-host, is also hosting Locked On NFL Draft, so he's getting more and more into the prospects, and we're going to have a lot of fun talking about every single position group, what the 49ers could do with their 9, who knows, maybe 10 draft picks if they trade a certain player and add some more of those picks before the draft comes in April.
Yeah, that certain player. That's funny. Before we get into that certain player, I just want to give a shout out to 49ers Ultimate Report with the $5 super chat. He said just wanted to stop by for a minute. Shout out to First Takes and shout out to Brian Peacock. Thank you very much, John J. It's much appreciated. So, being that player we were just mentioning without name, I guess we might as well just get into my first topic. The Jimmy G situation. Kind of a couple ways to look at this. One being, who's to blame for this catastrophe? And two, will the Niners ever end up getting anything for him, or is a release or a cut coming at some point down the line?
It's a wild situation, and it's not. I don't think it's as doom and gloom as maybe some 49ers fans who really want to see it ended. And I think there's an immediate gratification with all this, and fans are just waking up every day like, when is Garoppolo going to get traded? When is Garoppolo going to get traded? And once the new league year began, I think it was pretty clear that the 49ers were comfortable with carrying him on the roster for a while. And there was, certain dominoes that needed to fall in the market. Maybe the 49ers did overplay their hand with Jimmy Garoppolo. Maybe the shoulder surgery has a lot to do with it. There's the rumors out there about John Lynch and having the picks in hand. If he's turning down second-round picks for Jimmy Garoppolo, then you can definitely point at John Lynch, and that was a miscalculation. The second someone offered, here's one second-round pick, you say yes, and I'll fax over the paperwork. So if he didn't do that, then I guess you can point some blame at John Lynch. But clearly, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, as we saw last year, they value Jimmy Garoppolo, and if another team is not willing to give them the value, and I still don't know if those reports are accurate, if they did have a second-round pick in hand or not. But I don't think they should cut Jimmy Garoppolo. I think he's a starting quarterback. He's one of the top 20 quarterbacks in the league, depending on, how good you think he is. That's still a valuable commodity in the NFL. And if the shoulder surgery is what is hurting his value, then there's a very good chance if you held on to him all the way until July, which might be one of the possibilities now, even though, we thought he would have been long gone before the new league year began and free agency started. If he's there in July, and then now you're talking about a healthy Jimmy Garoppolo who can throw, and he wouldn't have taken any reps from Trey Lance in the OTAs because he would have been hurt, and Trey Lance would have gotten all the number one reps. And if you then have a team that maybe didn't draft the guy they wanted to in April, I mean, he could be a draft day trade as well. That could happen. But I'm just projecting all the way out until Jimmy Garoppolo's healthy, just to pass up the shoulder stuff. So now he's healthy. Now he can throw. Teams know that about him. He can pass a physical. If a team has an injury, a healthy Jimmy Garoppolo in July, it's really not that much different than trading him right now, as long as there is at least a team that wants him. They might have a reason. And then you would have some coverage, in case the worst happens. Maybe Trey Lance shows up and he's really bad, in the spring. And Kyle Shanahan's like, oh my God, this guy's worse than we thought. That would be a terrible thing. But you would have that coverage with Jimmy Garoppolo. Maybe, if God forbid, knock on wood, that Trey Lance got hurt, you would have that coverage with Jimmy Garoppolo. So there's some value to having Jimmy G. And I think he's valuable enough to other teams if he's healthy. The fact that he hasn't been healthy maybe made things a little bit more difficult. Clearly, though, you have to blame John Lynch if he did turn down good offers for Jimmy Garoppolo, because he should be gone, and the 49ers should be able to utilize that cap space. But I don't think you have to cut Jimmy Garoppolo now. And maybe things will heat up a little bit in the next coming days. Baker Mayfield, Matt Ryan has now moved on. The Carolina Panthers still have to do something at quarterback. Maybe the 49ers could take some salary back, not the entire salary, but part of Sam Darnold's salary, and you could send him to Carolina. There is, you can't send him to the Seahawks necessarily. So now that Winston's going to sign with the Saints, it's really the Carolina Panthers right now, or you got to wait and see if one of these teams maybe doesn't do something in the draft that they thought they were able to do. And then maybe Jimmy Garoppolo could be traded at that point. Maybe somebody gets hurt. Maybe the 49ers carry him all year. I don't know, but it's clear the 49ers aren't worried about carrying him for now. And so I think you just have to slowly let it play out and see. But I don't think they were going to be that much more, if any, more active in free agency. So I don't think it really hurts the 49ers as bad as some fans think to have him currently on the roster and to have carried him through free agency. But you don't want to pay a backup quarterback $25 million. So at some point you want to roll that money over into next year. So I wouldn't start training camp with Jimmy Garoppolo as a backup unless he takes a pay cut. And at that point, maybe he would be willing to do that. And then at that point, he's probably going to win a competition because he's a veteran over the young player in Trey Lance in training camp. I don't know if that would be a competition if you're a 1 and a 2. It's really weird for the same two quarterbacks to come back and flip 1 and 2 for 2 for 1 from the prior season. So I think it's still a very fluid situation. We'll see how things turn out. But he could be traded tomorrow, which is one thing I've learned every time I wake up. The NFL cycle surprises me with some kind of news out there. So who knows? Maybe he's a Carolina Panther in the next 24 hours.
Yeah, you guys, I've listened to some of your podcasts before where you literally say like, we just finished recording and then such and such news happening. You'll tell everybody the next day, like, we had just finished recording the podcast, downloaded it to where it needed to go, and the news dropped. It's like, but I am of the mindset that I feel like in order for Trey to really be entrenched and become the starter, I think Jimmy needs to not be here. And it's tough. It's, I'm not gloom and doom per se, because I think the Niners are a pretty talented team. So I don't have that worry. I just feel like there's a thought in my mind are the Niners being as, try to think of the word are the Niners being as frugal in free agency because of the Jimmy situation, or are they just being frugal because they're being frugal? I see the Chiefs, excuse me, not the Chiefs. I see the Rams, a team that just won the Super Bowl, and yet they still make all-in moves. And it's tough, man. Sometimes I look at the Niners and I'm like, I don't expect you to sign every big name that's on the market. I get that you're waiting for certain things to happen with the cap so that you can sign guys to extensions and whatnot. But man, sometimes you see that one player, maybe like a Tyrann Mathieu or a Chandler Jones, and you're like, oh, I would have been nice to, kind of insulate the Niners with a little stuff on each side of the ball, or all on defense, or split it between offense and defense. So that's kind of my question to you. How much is there a cap affected by it? Is the money real? Like the Rams seem to make it not seem, or are there really the Niners sitting on things because they can't move Jimmy?
I think it's been this way with Parag Marate, who's been in charge of the 49ers cap for a long time. It's been this way with them, and they've been among the lowest teams in dead cap money for a while. And that's an organizational philosophy. So they are looking at free agent contracts specifically different than other teams do, and they're not willing to kick that can down the road much, which will help them in some cases as well. I think you have to factor in Nick Bosa's upcoming big contract. I think you have to factor in Deebo Samuel's upcoming big contract. The 49ers went out and signed a fairly high-priced player in Charvarius Ward for a starting cornerback spot. And I don't think I expected him to sign any more than one sort of higher-priced guy, which is exactly what they did. And now it's key for them to be able to have, their homegrown talent show up. So, a first-round pick on Kinlaw. He should be able to replace a 6th-round pick in DJ Jones, right? And
right.
So you didn't have to spend money on a nose tackle if you drafted a first-round guy. You drafted a top 50 second-round player in Aaron Banks last year. He should be able to plug in and play left guard, and I think that's the direction the 49ers are going right now, and trusting their development and letting those guys play. And maybe they'll draft some more. Maybe there are some low-level free agents or some more draft picks that are going to come in and compete with those guys, and there should always be competition. But you look at the 49ers roster, they're already paying a lot of money for a tight end, which is usually not a high-priced position. They're paying a lot of money for a left tackle. They're going to be paying top money for an end. They're paying top money already for Eric Armstead. They're going to be paying top money for a wide receiver. So there's a lot of expenditures on the 49ers roster, and Fred Warner, among the highest paid linebackers in the league. So they have a lot of high-priced talent. So when you factor all that in and look how their roster looks, I think they don't think they're that far away. And if Trey Lance is as good as we all hope he is, and some of the glimpses we saw from him last year, that's really the key. That's where you're going to get a lot better, and they're going to be better off for it down the road, have better depth than some other teams. And look, the Rams, they signed Allen Robinson, but they lost Robert Woods and Odell Beckham, and they lost Von Miller, and they lost a starting cornerback in Darius Williams. So they lost more than they gained, even though it looks like they're still spending a lot of money, which they are, and they're putting all their resources into small areas. And one injury, and the Rams are screwed. If Aaron Donald is hurt, the Rams are kind of screwed, right? If Matthew Stafford gets hurt, the Rams are kind of screwed. So it is a razor thin line, and it worked out for them, and they won the Super Bowl. But the 49ers were right there, and they have a chance to be better by really not doing all that much this year, just staying the course, and they're trying to be really good for a long haul. And really, I don't think they were going to spend a lot of money in the years 2023, 2024, because they know they've got a couple of big contracts of their own that they want to do, so they don't have to let those guys walk like they did with Laken Tomlinson and DJ Jones.
I figured you'd have this steady mindset other than myself, because I'm always like, oh, man.
Yeah, it's like
they're letting this guy sign. Come on, guys, just once.
And special teams, right? They got a new teams coordinator.
Yes.
They spent as much resources as any team in the league now on special teams. They brought two really good coverage guys in Odom and Burks. They signed a return man to try to fix that return spot that's been pretty bad for them for a while. And door of players. They've got one of the higher paid kickers in the league. They spent a 4th-round pick on a punter, right, a couple of years ago. So they put resources into special teams. They're trying to be good there as well. So if you look at it overall, as long as Trey Lance is good, this team is as good or better than they were last year. And they lost a guard. You should be able to replace a guard and a nose tackle, when all is said and done.
I heard you on your last podcast this morning. It was done. So it was last night. You released it last night. So it was this morning. You said that you're not a big fan of the Wisnowski drafting in the 4th round. I am totally with you, dude.
It's
they treated it like a luxury pick, almost like they're that good.
We're completely. What's funny is they were actually better than we thought at the time, because they ended up going to the Super Bowl in 2019. But it's right. It's funny because Bradley Pinion, wasn't an amazing punter, but what's the difference in having punter? It's not like having quarterback 12 versus quarterback 20, having punter 12 versus punter 20. And really, Wishnowski's been kind of, middle of the league. He's been fine. It's not, it's not that I dislike Wishnowski. If he was an undrafted free agent, it's like, cool, we got a punter, fine. But they drafted a guy in the 4th round. There are players like, I'm trying to think of who my shadow draft players were that year. CJ Gardner-Johnson, like an actual player that could help you on defense, a starting caliber safety slot guy, such a valuable player for your team. And you're spending these picks on a punter. And when you could get just as good of a player in the round 5, round 6, undrafted in most cases. Most punters in the league are undrafted. And the crazy part of the Mitch Wishnowsky as a prospect thing is that he's going to be 30 years old this year.
Yeah,
Before
I
he's done
heard
with his
that.
rookie contract, he's actually older than Bradley Pinion, the guy he was replacing. So they drafted a really old punter prospect in the 4th round. And I think they saw what Michael Dixon did for the Seahawks and had a lot of big punts against them. But even still, Michael Dixon's not the reason the Seahawks were ever a good team or a playoff team. He's a nice punter, and it's a nice weapon to have sometimes. And special teams is important, but you gotta cool it sometimes when it comes to certain parts of your roster, and you can't pay a premium everywhere. And punter is the first spot where you don't pay a premium.
Kurt, the chameleon in the chat, says, I didn't expect them to sign anyone big name. And also because the market for receivers is so screwed up now. Debo is going to be expensive. Yeah. Oh, boy, the Jaguars. Trent Baalke.
Yeah, so bad teams hurt the good teams because you got Baalke over here throwing $18 million at wide receiver 3s. So, of course, caliber receivers are going to be wanting more money and commensurate with that. And then you have the numbers leaked out with Devontae Adams that it was $28.5 million. And it's really not, but that's what people are going to start asking for. It's only it's really probably going to be a 3-year contract where he's making $22 million per year. But the funny money makes it look like this big contract. So that's where everyone's going to go and want to get paid in the future. And the stupid Browns go out and guarantee hundreds of millions of dollars to Deshaun Watson. So now every quarterback that's going to come up is going to be asking for all this guaranteed money. So really bad teams making bad decisions are hurting the good teams that might have had something going. So now the 49ers are like, man, we were hoping to get Debo for 2021. And now he's going to be asking for $25 million per year, in the offseason or something crazy like that. So we'll see how that ends up going. And I have a feeling they might play it out with Debo a little bit just because his injury history. And if he's carrying the rock a lot at running back, I think he might be one where you say, if you can get a good deal with him this summer, you do it. If not, you let it play out. You have the franchise tag and maybe play a little bit more hardball with Debo than they have with some other players, because I don't like the idea. And it kind of happened with Kittle a little bit and Fred Warner a little bit, although they played good every season. But you never want to sign the guy right after he has his best season.
Mm-hmm.
And only one, because Debo broke out in year 3. If Debo got paid after year 2, it would have looked much different than what he did in year 3. So make sure he does it for another year again. If you're going to have to open up the pocketbook anyway, see it again for another year, see if he can stay healthy for you. So that's the way, maybe differently than I would go about Debo's contract upcoming than the 49ers did with Fred Warner and Kittle. And it's not to say they did it the wrong way with those guys. I just might do it a little bit differently with Debo. And then who knows, maybe they have to do Bosa and Debo next offseason.
Yeah, I know there's a significant cap jump coming. Someone said it in the upwards of, well, I don't know if this is right, so correct me if I'm wrong, 70 million?
It's something like that. It's not quite, because this cap went down in 2020 and then came back a little bit this year to where it was supposed to be in 2020, but there's going to be a big jump in 2023. It's going to go up quite a bit. And so I think that's why we're seeing a lot of these contracts already get big. And most of those contracts signed this offseason, that second year is where the number really jumps. Same way with Charvarius Ward, his cap number is only 3.8 million in this upcoming season, then jumps up to 16 million the following year. And then they could cut him after that if they wanted to. There's no guarantees for year 3 of his contract. But yeah, there's a lot of money that'll be hitting the books for a lot of teams that was spent this year, but it's on the credit card that'll start coming due in 2023 and 2024.
The Niners are definitely savvy with the pocketbook. I know some fans get irritated by it sometimes. I know I do. Sometimes I like to see him splurge. The problem is every time they splurge, they make a mistake, and it ends up being a bad move like D Ford.
I mean,
Quan Alexander.
I don't know how many. Quan Alexander was terrible. A lot of the early free agent moves by the 49ers and their
Pierre Garçon.
Their first couple of first-round picks, were really bad. Jerick McKinnon, I don't know why they were spending so much money on a third down back to begin with.
Yeah.
If you are going to spend some money, you want to make sure that player is a difference maker, and you'd much rather re-sign your own guys than go out and make a splash in free agency, and then you can't re-sign your own guys if you want to. But we see it every year, and we've seen it for ages now, that just because you win March does not mean you're going to be winning in September through January, and we see it over and over and over and over again. So I will throw that out there for the teams you think won big. There's a lot of talent on those teams, and I think in a lot of cases they got some good players, but there's some bad money thrown out there in free agency as well.
Definitely. Kurt the Chameleon in the chat again says offensive line is my worst fear. I totally agree with you on that one. He says, I did hear that we have School, though. Yeah, he looks like he's rehabbing. I wasn't the biggest School guy coming out in the draft. I was like, he looks a little unathletic and kind of odd shaped.
He's
No,
got
I'm
a bad
pretty,
body. He's really
yeah.
heavy looking. He doesn't
He,
look smart. And he maybe he plays better than he looks. I would say, but yeah, he's a reserve offensive lineman. So he's not a guy that's going to come in and fix anything for you.
right. He looks like me now at 42 because I've let myself go and I'm 6'3", 260. So I'm a little bit oblong looking, like kind of like him, but he's a young man. It's like, what are you doing, bro? Like I'm middle aged. I don't really have an excuse, but it's still,
Yeah.
it's like, that's an odd looking, but he's
No,
making, yeah.
you do have an excuse because I'm with you. And like all of a sudden, you have kids, you start turning 40, and things go south very quickly.
Yes,
Like
they do.
it's like, and it's harder to fight everything off. You can't lose
Mhm.
it as quick when you do start working out. So no, that you're not to blame there. But yeah, if you're 22 years old and you look like a potato with toothpicks for legs, then it's like it's a little bit odd. So he's a bad body player, but he's not terrible. But yeah, he's not going to be an answer. He's a reserve offensive tackle. I think the same for Colton McKivitz. Maybe it's going to be the two rookies from last year, Jalen Moore and Aaron Banks, battling out at left guard. A little bit worried about the age at center and who the future center is going to be. They already were trying to upgrade from Dan Brunskill and couldn't do it last year. So do they want to upgrade there? The 49ers could be in trouble, and they needed to be better on the offensive line they were last year. It's the one place they've already taken a step back. So maybe some bargain free agents, maybe in the draft, and hope those guys develop and the younger players play a little bit better. And then there's McGlinchey, who's coming off a pretty bad injury that doesn't have as good of a track record of recovering from with that torn quad. So
Yeah, that's a
if
crazy
he's
one.
gone and there's no Tom Compton there, is that where Jalen Moore needs to go? Is that School? Is that McKivitz? So a lot of question marks there. And so maybe that pick 61 in the draft, maybe offensive line is the right place to spend that.
Kirk Chameleon says the surgery really put a clamp on Jimmy's trade. I believe he would have been gone otherwise. I think so too. I really think, why would you trade draft assets for a guy who's coming off of surgery when you can go get another quarterback for, the same amount, and he comes right into camp or off season, OTAs ready to go. So yeah, that was, there was talk that Don Yee was trying to double dip and that's why he had Jimmy wait. He's definitely on my bad list. Don Yee. People are like, maybe it's Jimmy. Maybe he's not such a great guy. I'm thinking, no, I think it's more Don Yee than anything. He's the agent. So
That's what agents are paid to do. I don't think that was it though, because to me the timeline makes perfect sense. Jimmy was hurt, so it's not like he went under the knife and didn't need to. You're not going to advise your client to go get unnecessary surgery, right? So,
right.
Really, what happened was he got surgery at the last point he could to still be 100% by July and be ready for some team's training camp. So he tried to rehab it for a month. He wasn't sure if it was going to take or not. The worst thing that would have happened for Jimmy, and a team's not going to trade for a guy if they look at his shoulder in the middle of March and say, well, he's going to need surgery now, and now it's later, so now he might not even be ready for training camp. So that's the worst thing for Jimmy if he has surgery in April, and then now it's pushed back to August, and so now he's missing training camp on that shoulder. So to me, I don't think the timing was weird at all, and I don't think it was Don Yee or Jimmy Garoppolo trying to get cut. I think it was them seeing if they could rehab and took it up to the limit of time that they had to decide before he was going to be 100% after surgery for training camp. So that one makes perfect sense to me, and I know a lot of conspiracy theorists want to throw some ideas out there, but I'll throw some cold water on that one because to me the timeline makes perfect sense. He tried to rehab until he had the last moment to be 100% before training camp and decided to make sure he was going to be right this season so he could earn his next contract. So I don't fault Jimmy or Don Yee for that one.
I've had clean outs in my shoulder twice and a little bit of, sanding down on a bone that was kind of making some problems. The 12 to 16 weeks is pretty much par for the course for physical therapy. Physical therapy sucks, man. I'm telling you right now. It is the drizzling, what. So that timetable, whatever, is pretty much, yeah. So I've been there. I've done it. I mean, technically, I guess you could soft toss a ball, but you want the shoulder to really, scar tissue and stuff like that to be moved out of there. Because anytime you have surgery in a shoulder or any body part, one of the things that they do in PT is they move things around and they're constantly stretching it because they're trying to work out scar tissue. So yeah, you can't really throw at scar tissue in your shoulder. So I completely get the timetable. Kurt says he's 40 with a dad bod, says he knows what we mean. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
It's hard to fight that off, man. It's life.
And when
It's
you're a tall guy too, it's even weirder because a lot of my weight is in my midsection. It's like it's weird. Like I was skinny for my whole life. I couldn't gain any weight, and then I hit 25, had like a crazy relationship breakup, and then I got chubby. It's like, what happened?
Dude, yeah, for me, it was having a kid, and I do a lot more working from home than I used to. And I used to live in the city, so I'm walking all around in hills all the time. And so I don't have that extra bit of activity that I used to have a lot of times. And man, it hits you quick. I'm saying I was like skinny, tall guy forever. And then, the weight starts coming on. It's like, man, but I don't want to like not have a beer ever. Right. I want to enjoy
Right.
my life too. And it gets that much more difficult. But yeah, it's a good reminder though, that you got to keep on it. You really got to keep on it. And sometimes you just got to work a little bit harder just to maintain and not let it get worse.
Yeah, I definitely got to get some cardio in soon. I'm on the East Coast up in northern, what do you call Western New York, Rochester, New York. So it's like, it's your normal 4 seasons. And right now it's kind of nice outside, but it's still like 45 degrees. So not the most optimal running around weather.
Yeah, it's a lot here in the wintertime there, right? To put on that weight because you're
absolutely
indoors so much.
Plus, I like pizza, so that's my other problem.
Of course.
Thoughts on some of the free agents so far that we've signed? Javarius Ward, Hassan Ridgeway, Oren Burks, Ray McLeod, George Odom. Anybody you want to pick at? I'll ask you about Javarius Ward. I've been looking at him, and he looks very promising. What are your thoughts on him?
I've made my own opinions and watched those players, and I think what I've seen really lines up with what I'm hearing from fans of those teams and people who cover the teams that they came from. And it's funny because Hassan Ridgeway, a lot of people really like him, but his motor runs hot and cold. And essentially, if you keep him motivated, he's a pretty good player and a pretty good penetrator, but nobody thinks he should be a starting caliber player. But, maybe with Chris Kosurik and what he's done with other players and, gets him fired up, and you get his best few snaps in rotation per game from him rushing from the inside, and he can give you something. He's a pretty athletic guy, and, maybe he would be a starting caliber player if his motor ran hot all the time. So maybe the 49ers can just, squeeze a little bit more out of that rag as far as a rotational depth piece inside, especially with the injury history of Javon Kinlaw, although Ridgeway's not so much of a run stuffer as he is more of a penetrator and a pass rusher. So he's definitely not the replacement for DJ Jones inside. And I wonder if the Niners might go with, go find someone who's 320 pounds in the draft, maybe in the middle rounds to give them some snaps as a potential nose tackle on the roster, because they're pretty light in the inside all of a sudden. Then Ray McLeod, most of the people I've talked to aren't super sad to see him go out of Pittsburgh. So
I heard that. I was listening to your podcast. Yep.
Yeah. So he's a return man. That's fine. Not somebody who strikes fear into the opponent, but he can return kicks for you. He had some fumble issues, I think, earlier on in his career that he's recovered from a little bit. My co-host Matt Williamson on the Peacock and Williamson NFL show was basically glad he was gone because he was too big of the part of their offense last year. He caught 39 balls, and he's like, yeah, there's just everything's within 1 yard of the line of scrimmage. But I see that, and former high school running back, I think Kyle Shanahan has a vision for how he wants to use him on offense. But I think that signing wasn't so much about offense. I think that, he's going to be wide receiver 4, at most, probably for the 49ers. It was, and a little slot guy that they can use some gadgety stuff on, hand him the ball in some ways, maybe do some of Devo's stuff and take some of the workload off Devo as a running back and do some of those fun things. But he's a return man. They wanted to fix their return game. They wanted to fix special teams. And that's really what the Oren Burks signing was about. He fits their profile as a, former safety, athletic, undersized, sort of a linebacker. So reserve backer that is a special teams demon. And George Odom, everybody in Indy was like, oh man, the former players, current players, fans were like, oh man, we loved this guy. I'm sad to see him go. And just because he was like one of the best special teams guys in the league. So they really improved their coverage units, get Tarvarius Moore back as well, who's really good with that athleticism on the outside as a gunner. So I think for those reasons, special teams definitely got a lot better. And it was clearly something the 49ers were prioritizing in free agency, and, spend a little bit of money on shoring up those things and also getting a new special teams coordinator.
Speaking of free agency, you said that Odom, I listened to your podcast, and that he could be an option at safety to replace Tart. If there was any other free agent that you would like to be signed that the Niners might make another splurge in, I'm of the Tyrann Mathieu camp. I know that's probably you know you know what's the word I'm looking for, pie in the sky for me, but anybody out there that you would be like, man, maybe the Niners should take a shot at that guy.
Not really. I think most of the true starting caliber free strong safeties, aside from Matthew, have signed. And, the 49ers can use somebody that could play in the slot a little bit as well. So Matthew, I could see being a really sneaky signing if it's, now we're in the next phase of free agency after the top guys have signed, although there's still a few top guys out there that I think are holding out for more money.
Right.
Man, Tyrann Mathieu, if you can get him on the right deal, maybe a backloaded deal that you could potentially get out from under, that looks better on paper than it actually is. And the 49ers, there's no doubt they like Tyrann Mathieu. They've played against him a couple times per year. He's made plays against the 49ers. He's not a secret. And so would the 49ers value that enough to make a little bit of a splash in free agency? I wouldn't be completely shocked, but I don't think I would expect anything at the top edge of the market. But he's somebody that is a name that wouldn't completely shock me. And then just bringing Tart back, because I think he's seeing again, like he saw last year, there's not a lot of money out there for that just below the top starter level safeties. I don't think teams are lining up to pay Tart with his injury history. So the Niners might just get him right back on another sort of a short, fairly cheap deal. But I feel like, just like I talked about with Aaron Banks at left guard, I think Hufanga is probably the guy. I think they like him, and penciling him in worries me a little bit. But Odom, I think, could be a backup strong safety. You've got Tarvarius Moore coming back as well. Maybe a little competition there. And I fully expect the Odom signing to be all about special teams. But he's done all right when he got a chance to play defense as well. So more of a reserve role. So right now, if the season started, I think there would be some pretty prominent roles for some recently drafted guys like Hufanga and Aaron Banks. But I'm sure they'll get some competition, and maybe day 2 of the draft is another place that they can find a player, on a rookie contract that can give them some snaps in multiple ways: strong safety, free safety, maybe even as a slot defender next year. There's a couple of names out there that I think would make sense for the 49ers in that vein. There is one more name I want to throw out there in free agency is Zadarius Smith. And the reason I don't think the 49ers would go there is because his back injury. And I wonder if that had something to do with, either him or the Ravens backing out of that free agent contract that looked like it was done. But $9 million per year, it's a lot less than Chandler Jones got. Zadarius Smith's done well against the 49ers when he's healthy. He's a really good player. I think the 49ers would love him on the right contract.
Yes.
And if they were willing to go out there and spend some money on Chandler Jones, they might look at Zadarius Smith as the next best thing and might be a lot cheaper because of the injuries. But again, I think the 49ers, and we saw it with Charvarius Ward, and we saw it in the draft last year. That might have been part of why they liked Aaron Banks so much, is he didn't miss a lot of games in college, and Charvarius Ward hasn't missed a lot of games in the NFL. It's something that they've clearly prioritized. So maybe all these guys with injury histories that we're looking at just aren't on their radar because they don't want to continue to go through what they've gone through with D Ford. And that's what's scary, is you're still paying D Ford, and then you bring in another guy that's got a pretty big cap number, that's got a back injury that can be scary. So that's why Zadarius Smith might not actually be a fit, but they could absolutely use another edge player on this team. And, who knows, maybe again, pick 61, pick 93. If I had to guess right now, interior offensive line, need a future center, need a maybe right now guard. I would say edge rusher, even if it's just a situational edge pass rushing type of a player. Still haven't re-signed Arden Key, who's, I think, meeting with Detroit today or yesterday. And wide receiver, they only have 4 wide receivers under contract, so I don't think I'd throw that out. And then there's another position. And safety. Sort of a safety, middle of the field defender. So those are the priorities right now, whether they're looking for second wave free agents or looking for draft picks in April.
Beautiful. I was actually going to ask you their draft needs, because I kind of agree with you. My biggest 3 draft needs would be offensive line, either a slot corner or a safety, and then edge rusher. Those are my biggest concerns. And you're right. If a guy like Zadarius gets signed and fans are clamoring for him, as soon as he gets hurt next year, everybody's going to be completely change their tune. and say, hey, the 49ers, see, they did it again. They went after an injury-prone guy and blah, blah, blah. I definitely think they are starting to the worm is turning a little bit with they're starting to move away from guys like Mostert going. I wasn't super upset about it because I feel like they need to start. First of all, they need to get younger. So, like some of these signings that they have made, a lot of these guys are pretty young. So that's a good thing. And two, none of them really have any outstanding injury history that you know of. So those are two things that I'm really happy about. Yeah, a guy like Tyrann Mathieu would be like the icing on the cake. Za'Darius, like you said, they need something other than Bosa. I feel like Bosa has so much pressure on him to be Superman every single game, and we all know he has injury history. Both of him and his brother, his dad had injury issues when he was playing too, so it's in the DNA. But yeah, it's weird. Like part of me likes the building through the draft philosophy, but I also I collaborate with a lab. His name is Peo Time, real good guy, and won the Super Bowl and run in the playoffs, I was really pissy. And I was saying they bought everything. They don't draft well. The Niners do it right. They do it wrong. And then I started thinking, like, if the goal is to win the Super Bowl and you want to go off your philosophy, then go for it. And it worked. I mean, think of the 94 49ers right before free agency hit, how we went all in. I mean, we went after everybody. We rebuilt defense pretty much with free agents other than maybe Bryant Young. And I'm trying to think who else we drafted that helped our def. It might have been only Bryant Young. I'm not sure, but yeah, that was and Lee Woodall too. But yeah, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. If you go buck wild in free agency, and the fans are happy right now, but then if it doesn't work out, it's a bad signing. If you do nothing, kind of like the Niners do sometimes, you can't win. So my whole thing is, if you're gonna depend on the draft, just make sure you hit, because I understand the philosophy of drafting your own players and then rewarding them with contracts that say like, listen, we really value, we want to keep you here a long time. So we'll see. I mean, there's still a lot of time between now and the season, so for everybody to lose their mind is just right now would be ridiculous.
Right, and the 49ers still have a good roster, so, they do nothing else. They're gonna be good, and they still have plenty of time, plenty of resources to do some more things, even if they have Jimmy Garoppolo. But who knows? Maybe Jimmy G gets traded, and they say, "You know what? Let's use about $15 million of that dollars to go sign Tyrann Mathieu." Who knows?
That would be awesome. I wouldn't be against that at all.
Yeah.
Somebody in the comments made a really good point. Who's tight end number 2? Because tight ends, nobody really played well last year. I mean, Kittle was banged up, but Charlie Warner, and I'm trying to think of the other tight end, Rostueli. What happened? Like, the offense in general just was not that great last year. But
I do think that Rostueli and Charlie Warner are both sort of tight end 3s. So I don't know if the Niners really have a tight end 2. I guess if you combine what the 49ers have when they move people around, and you have Warner, who's a better blocker, you have Dwelly, who's not as good of a blocker, but maybe a little bit more athletic in the passing game, but doesn't really light the world on fire there either. But the 49ers clearly like Ross Dwelly. And then you factor in the OW in Kyle Juszczyk, as well as sort of an H-back tight end player that you can move around. I don't think the Niners necessarily missing a tight end 2, but I also wouldn't be shocked if day 3 of the draft they're drafting another sort of tight end to give them a little bit something that maybe they've been missing when they go 2 tights or when George Kittle is hurt. So yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with them looking at tight end 2, but it's well down the list of, I think, priorities for the 49ers when it comes to the draft. But if the right guy's there, yeah, give a guy a shot.
Yeah, I feel like you attack your needs first, and then you go after your, that would be nice move after, you know what I mean? Because if you're playing, I mean, I'm of the mindset that you go based on your board, and you draft that way. But sometimes I feel like in the draft, they say if you draft your need, that's a horrible way to be. Sometimes you need certain players, and
sometimes you have some needs, and you want to make sure that your needs line up with where the strength of the board is. And I would look at the 49ers last year in the second round. There was Azeez Ojulari, who the 49ers could use right now, who's an edge player, who was one of the best players on the board when they drafted. There was Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who's awesome, who's Niners don't need linebacker necessarily, but they forced themselves into, I think, a need with Aaron Banks, and it doesn't really look that good. I think if they would have waited on guard, who knows if Banks is there, who knows if there was another player who's going to play just as good as Banks in the third round. then you go get that best player available when there's a first round caliber guy that's still there for you in the top 50 in the second round. You do that first. And so that's why it's better to get your needs done in free agency and then go into the draft with the best player available mentality. Ideally, you can't always do that in the salary cap era, but I think the cap's going up to the point where, and we're seeing that teams are spending a lot of money. I think that's why the stars and scrubs sort of rosters that some teams are throwing out there, we're seeing more teams doing that, more teams making bigger splashes. And it worked out for the Rams is because the salary cap allows you more than it used to do that. So you don't have to be so strictly organically built and keeping salaries low, because almost everybody starts making money at some point in this league nowadays.
Yeah, it's like that fine line that when you have a team where to me, I think free agency is good for, the draft is a crapshoot. It always has been. There's no guarantee that anybody you pick is going to be any good. And if you have a mind, like if you have a move on your team that is like, hey, if we just have this player in this role, this will put us over the top, then I say do that in free agency. If you're waiting for that in the draft, chances are you're going to miss. I mean, you could say what you want about the Niners with some of their draft misses, but if you look at the Seattle Seahawks, that is one team that has not drafted well in recent times, and now they're paying for it. Say what you want about the Patriots. Patriots draft well most of the time. Steelers have always been a really good drafting team. They don't pay for a lot for outside free agents, so it's yes, it's a money ball approach if you want to look at it that way. Where you save by keeping your own guys. But I feel like it's sustainable to keep a team good if you continually hit in the draft, other than having to always pay for top flight, top end players, because then your depth is so thin. So I understand, like, people are like, oh, let's trade away Dre Greenlaw and let's trade away Aziz. No, keep them all. I want them all. I don't want to get rid of any of them.
Yeah,
The
keep
Niners,
players unless someone pays the price that makes it more worth your while, because you have to think that's why you see a lot of players traded for 2 draft picks, because they know one of those picks is going to bust. It's kind of a flip of the coin, even on the earlier draft picks, if a guy's going to be good or not. So you trade away a good player, you want 2 picks because odds are you're going to screw up one of those picks anyway. And there's just so many different ways a player can go wrong when it comes to young players that teams bring in through the draft. So yeah, it's definitely hit and miss, but when you hit on them, it is so valuable.
any draft crushes that you have in mind? I haven't paid as much attention to the combine slash draft this year as I mean, I'm usually very, very obsessed. But any draft crushes that you have, somebody that if the Niners have that pick at that point and can make the move that you would, or a player that the Niners you think could maybe trade up for, like package a bunch of second and third and a fifth rounder or something, come up and make a move.
Well, I start looking at those needs I talked about. And, if one of those stud pass rushers starts to fall out around 1, especially if the 49ers trade Jimmy G and they get another pick, so they have an ability to move around and not really, hurt their overall, the overall number of picks they're going to bring in. And by the way, they're probably not going to, 9 players might not make the roster for the 49ers anyway.
Right.
So they do have a lot of draft picks and they can move around, even though some of those are late. Someone like Lewis Seen from safety, if he's available in the second round and safeties can tend to fall on draft day, I think he'd be a difference making type that could be completely interchangeable with Jimmy Ward. And that's what I'd be looking for if they draft a safety, is someone who's athletic enough that you can put him in center field. That's where I worry a little bit about Hufanga. He did a little bit of that last year, but I like him in more of a third safety dime linebacker role, strong safety, box safety, close to the line of scrimmage. He's really good coming forward. Going in reverse is where I worry about him. So,
Agreed.
Brought in somebody who can interchange, play free safety and strong safety, maybe get down on the slot and cover a little bit. So, someone like Lewis Seen, if they're trying to get a little bit frisky and go up, he might be a first round pick anyway, because he's kind of a stud and he threw down with the combine as well. But I would say Jason Petrie from Baylor, defensive back, kind of meets a lot of those. He's kind of very similar to Jimmy Ward in a way, where he can, kind of cover in the slot a little bit. People have compared him to Tyrann Mathieu. It's hard to put that on a guy, but you don't really see a lot of him in deep safety. And I'm waiting to see what his numbers are at the pro days, because he didn't work out at the combine, or he didn't run a 40 at the combine. But athletically, if he can do that, I think he would make some sense. More of a, second, third round pick type of guy, probably, right around 61. Nick Bonito is a player out of Oklahoma, edge rusher that I've started to warm up to. I really like the guy I like the most in the draft. And at this point, he's just had such an amazing offseason. He's going to go higher maybe than the 49ers would be able to select at 61. And I see him in a lot of mock drafts at 93 for the 49ers. And I thought maybe he would be a third round guy coming into this thing, but he might be a first round guy. Is Christian Watson,
Yep.
Trey Lance's former teammate. I mean, he just checked every single box. He was great at the Senior Bowl, had a really unbelievable combine at 6'4", 211 pounds, 4.3 speed, and like just crazy workouts. And he's a really good player, and pairing the college teammates, what we saw with how good it worked with the Bengals, right? I mean, maybe just because he's a small school guy and there's some other really good wide receivers in this draft, and there's a lot of them. Maybe he falls there to 61. Would the 49ers pull the trigger on a guy like that? I don't know. But yeah, and then offensive line, there's a number of guys. I've watched a lot of Cole Strange, friend of the podcast, Javier Vega, turned me on to him, saw him at the Senior Bowl. I looked more at him, and I really like him, and the middle round type of guy who could be a guard / center, maybe a future center, maybe provide depth, or who knows, if he balls out as a rookie, even be a starting caliber player from jump for the 49ers. Offensive tackle is a really deep offensive tackle class, so I would look there as well. I don't know if I have any specific names I like, because a lot of those guys tend to go so early. It's going to be a crazy run in the first round of offensive tackles. But, man, with McGlinchey not having Tom Compton, if Jalen Moore is needed at left guard, I think long-term tackle is a really, really sneaky need as well. So really anything across the offensive line, just as long as you don't draft a lead-footed guard only player. If you draft a guy who can play guard, you better be able to also be a starting caliber tackle, or potentially a starting caliber center if you're drafting him early.
One thing I will say, and I agree with you on, is I think the longer the 49ers, the longer that Jaquiski Tartt is on the market, I feel that the chances of him coming back seem to go up. And that, I think, eliminates safety out of the equation in the draft, which with free agency, that's what you kind of want anyways. If guys are affordable, is the more options you can fill through, either, retaining your own guys or signing someone through free agency, kind of makes your draft a little bit, I can't say easier, but you can kind of take chances on drafting for need per se. So
yeah, so like maybe need would be the tiebreaker for you. If you're sitting on the board at 61, you like a strong safety and you like a wide receiver. Well, if Ward comes, or if a Tartt comes back, it makes you feel a lot better about your depth at safety. So maybe you can splurge and go for the wide receiver. And by the way, if in year 3, Brandon Ayuk has a breakout like Deebo Samuel did in his year 3, I don't know if you can afford to keep all those guys around anyway. So maybe you have to trade one of those guys. So maybe you do need that next starting caliber wide receiver, ready to go. Plus you need depth at wide receiver anyway. And we've seen so many injuries, the 49ers need to start outscoring some people rather than just relying on their defense to win every single week. So, go score some stinking points and put 3 wide receivers on the field with George Kittle. But, and then maybe that allows you to find value because you said, okay, no, we're going to go with this other player at another position that might not be the most immediate need. We're going to draft this guy here, pass rusher or, whatever. And then, oh, look, third round, that safety's still there, or within striking distance, we can go up and get that guy too. So it allows you to utilize need as maybe a tiebreaker more so than just being like, we need this position, that you can get best player in position groups rather than just like being so laser focused on one position.
Yeah, I feel like when you have to draft for need, it's a lot more pressure. I feel like if it's a quote unquote a luxury pick where you can kind of take a chance on it, I think that's when I like the draft in that way. It's when you have to draft, you got to hit on this guy. Man, that's like that makes or break a GM's career if that's the case.
And I think we're starting to see in Kyle Shanahan's offense that he doesn't like rookies all that much.
No, he does
occasionally
not.
A guy breaks through like Elijah Mitchell, but he was the second running back they took, right? They didn't play the third rounder at all, really, at the end of the year, especially. They played the sixth rounder. So I think it's harder to get traction in Kyle Shanahan's offense for most rookies. So if you're drafting offensive players, you're really looking ahead past the next year anyway. So, if you're drafting a center, you're looking beyond when Alex Mack's going to be on the roster anyway. So draft a center now, so he is ready next year. So you don't have to draft a center next year or be forced to spend money that, an absurd amount of money in free agency because you need a starter right now at that position. So look ahead an extra year, I think would be smart as far as some of those things go. So center and tackle for those reasons might be bigger needs than most fans are looking at.
Definitely. Real quick, we got about 10 minutes left. What's your thought on the coaching hires? 14 new coaches added to the staff here. Big overhaul. How much of it is people not agreeing with the philosophy and the change Trey Lance and how much of it is just they decided to change their coaching staff? Like where do you put it?
The big thing is just how much changeover there was, and not even completely necessary changeover. You understand if someone gets a head coaching job or something, but it wasn't like Mike McDaniel's the only guy that left the coaching staff. And I understand what happened with the assistant head coach thing and John Embry and the tight end job. They wanted to take assistant head coach away from him because they wanted to give it to Anthony Lynn. And I have no problem with that. And I have no problem with Embry saying, no, I'm not going to take a pay cut and give away that title. So he went and found a job somewhere else, right? I don't have a problem with that one. That one, and Mike McDaniel, those don't worry me. But when, Wes Welkers of the world are leaving, and I don't think it's necessarily because he's such a great coach that the 49ers are going to be hurting because he's gone. But so much changeover is like, okay, what's going on? Were you not a good evaluator to these coaches before? Do these coaches want out? So it does worry me because I think in a lot of ways, like some players, it's maybe not quite as easy to just plug and play and coach, and he's going to know exactly how Kyle wants things. And maybe it takes some time for those coaches to find their groove under Kyle Shanahan. And does it show that there's maybe some coaches that have some big time disagreements with Kyle Shanahan? Is he a tough guy to coach with? I don't buy into the thing where people are like, oh, they didn't agree with Trey Lance, so they're out. I'm not so sure about that. And look, if someone like Mike McDaniel and some of his assistant coaches, they love Jimmy Garoppolo that much, why is he not a Miami Dolphin right now? You're the head coach of the team. And there was a story today about Teddy Bridgewater who said, I'm not going to tell you. He was asked about if they told him if he was, competing for a starting job or if he was just a backup. And he's like, well, I'm not going to tell you about what they told me in those private conversations. And it's like, did they even Teddy Bridgewater is not an answer if you don't like Tua in the first place. And if you don't like Tua in the first place, why is Jimmy Garoppolo not currently a Miami Dolphin, and flip Tua somewhere else? So I don't know how much to look into that if they really don't believe in Tua over there in Miami, but that's a little bit curious. And if there was anything to that, then of course Jimmy Garoppolo would have already been traded for, because what's a second round pick to get a starting quarterback in this league in a lot of ways. So I don't look too much into the coaching staff stuff. And for, a lot of the assistants, it's just hard to know. I don't know enough about these guys. I don't know enough about what their job description is and how good they are at doing it. But overall, Kyle Shanahan Kyle Shanahan's probably a better judge of coaching talent than he is of playing talent, to be honest with you. His track record is better. So at this point, I really have no reason to really critique at all, Kyle Shanahan's choice of coaching staff.
Speaking of coaches that are not going to be here this year, Bobby Turner, of course, longtime running back coach, went back as far as his, Kyle Shanahan's daddy when he coached for the Broncos. How much of that how much of him not being able to affect the run game, or do you think it's seamless?
I don't know. That's tough because he's been so good and been doing it for so long. I don't even know what it could look like with a Shanahan offense without Bobby Turner involved, right? I think we've seen it for 1 year. He was out. And he's also so good at identifying that talent. I think the scouting department, I think the Trey Sermon pick was John Lynch and his crew. And I think the Elijah Mitchell was Bobby Turner pick, and the Bobby Turner pick was the one that turned out to be the better player, or maybe just Kyle Shanahan wanted to lean on the Bobby Turner guy more. But yeah, I think his ability to find running backs has been huge. He's the one that found Matt Breida when they drafted Joe Williams, who turned out to be, garbage.
Unbelievable.
But yeah, again, I just don't know how valuable a running backs coach is. Maybe the combination of losing both McDaniel, the running game coordinator, and the offensive coordinator now, but we know what his role is in the run game, and Bobby Turner together, maybe those two combined could be a little bit rough, although that's one of Anthony Lynn's expertises as well.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's exactly what I was going to say. Anthony Lynn came in for a reason.
Yeah, hopefully that makes up for it. And Kyle Shanahan's still the designer and the caller of plays. So we'll see how that goes, and we'll see if they're able to coach guys up. I tend to think it's not that big of a deal with the assistant coaches, but it's really just hard to say.
I asked this question to Larry Krueger, and he didn't shoot it down, but he was like, no, you don't do it. Trade Kittle when he still has value, because of just him getting older and having, issues missing games, and how much is he going to be part of the offense now that Trey Lance is the quarterback, and the Niners might try to open things up and not everything be, 5 to 15 yards in front of the line of scrimmage. Like, I mean, would you do it? I mean, I never thought I would say this, but I don't know, man. Like, Bill Walsh did it. He got rid of guys when there was still value on them. Why not? Why not Kyle Shanahan? What's your think? It's just a random thing that I'm throwing out there.
I agree with Larry on this one. Yeah. It's completely unnecessary because why would you make your team worse? And
exactly, that's what Larry said.
As long as Kittle's on the field, he's impacting the game, even if he's not getting targeted a lot in the passing game. And I think they could do a better job of targeting him more in the passing game. I don't like the injury history. And he was a little bit of an older prospect, a fifth-year senior coming out of school, so he's already 29 years old. He'll be hitting that 30 mark pretty soon. But I think he'll be fine through his age 32 season, 2025. Maybe you let him walk after that point. Maybe if he starts to break down a little bit more, you could trade him with name value after the 2024 season or something like that. But as of now, he's too important. He's a heart and soul player for the 49ers.
Agreed.
And really, with even the top paid tight ends, they get paid so little. I mean, he's going to be making the same much per year as someone like Charvarius Ward is making, right? So it's not like he's going to hurt your team cap-wise either. So he's just too important of a player, and what are you going to get back? Are you going to get some superstar player back? Then maybe we can talk. But if you're going to get like a late first round pick, then that just doesn't move the needle for me anyway.
Definitely. Kurt the Chameleon says Kittle is a must-have for leadership and tone setting, like you said. So yeah, I just I listen to a variety of content creators, podcasters, and some people like I'm name dropping him out of disrespect. He's great. He's got a huge following. Grant Cohn. He always makes you think. He puts that idea out there. He dangles the carrot. So I figured, why not dangle the carrot? I don't have the gravitas or the following, but I figured I'd put it out there. Larry was like, why would you get rid of one of your better players? I'm like, true. Just putting it out there. Yeah. I'm not for it.
Grant Cohn is like the waiter that comes around with the dessert tray because you weren't thinking about dessert, but then you see the dessert walk by your table and it's like, oh, that kind of does look good. Maybe I'll have one of those.
Yeah. I figure, sometimes I play a straight man. There's so many other creators out there. Some people are a little bit more bombastic or whatever, but sometimes I like to think of stuff that might piss people off. Be like, you're going to give them like, no, I'm just saying, I'm just putting it out there, but appreciate you coming on.
I will say also one more note on the George Kittle.
No problem.
I think dead cap money wise that I don't think it's really even possible that they could move on from him right now until later in his contract.
Yeah, he's getting paid quite a hefty penny right now, so that'd be really dumb. That's why I'm not the GM and I'm just a fan who has a YouTube channel.
Dude, well, the Atlanta Falcons ate $40 million of dead cap money today, so what do I know?
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate you coming on, Brian, making time, your busy schedule. I know you do a lot of stuff on your, with your dual podcast. You got kids, you're married, all that stuff. So I appreciate you coming on. Again, you want to just real quick let people know where to find you if they do not know already, if they're here late?
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to everybody. I've been seeing the comments here coming through. I always love seeing the live shows and the people interacting as we go. Yeah, you can find Locked On 49ers every single day on all of your podcast feeds. We're on YouTube now as well. So come check us out there and subscribe and, hit the thumbs up buttons and all of that stuff. And make sure you do the same for Aaron here on the 49ers First Takes. You can find me on Twitter at BD Peacock. You can see that on the screen. I'm also doing the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. It used to be Locked On NFL, but now we're doing a separate thing called the Peacock and Williamson NFL show with former NFL scout, ESPN writer, now Pro Football Network writer, Matt Williamson. And we're bringing that to you daily on the Locked On Podcast Network as well, talking about the entire league. So, yeah, make sure you check both of those podcasts out. Appreciate you having me on, Aaron.
Thank you very much. Everybody in the chat, thank you for your involvement and asking Brian questions and myself questions. Like I said, guys, your support, your undying loyalty is awesome. It's super appreciated. Like I said, go check out Brian and all his stuff. All his stuff is in my descriptions down below, so takes you right to it. And till next time, everyone, stay safe, stay healthy, and as I always tell everybody, I'll see you on the flip side, everyone. See ya.